The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. There is a baptism with which I must be baptized, and how great is my anguish until it is accomplished. Do you think that I have come to establish peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, a household of 5 will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. A father will be divided against his son, and a son against his father, a mother against her daughter, and a daughter against her mother, a mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You might remember that a few weeks ago, we heard a story in the Gospel of someone who cried out to Jesus and said, "Lord, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." So there's this family conflict going on between these siblings over their inheritance. And Jesus responds with a rather lengthy sermon warning people to guard themselves against greed. And then he tells a few parables that distinguish between a type of worldly riches that's vulnerable to being taken by thieves and rotting away by moths and things like that, and a treasure that is stored in heaven. Well, this week's gospel is still part of that lengthy sermon. Jesus is still responding to this person who made this request that he settle their dispute. And so we have to keep that in mind as we interpret what Jesus says here about division within a family. Because Jesus, contrary to the way some people might interpret this, is not telling us to lean into every possible conflict over religion and things of that nature that we might have. The assumption here is actually that a person begins with a certain maybe preoccupation with worldly things, worldly prestige, worldly wealth, or something of that nature, and then is being called out of that and leaving it behind. Again, it's not really starting from the perspective that people are already following the Lord and people might leave. Okay, that's not really what's going on. It's a type of division in which some members of a family might leave former ways to pursue higher things. And a few examples of history, of course. One of them is the story of St. Francis of Assisi. I think his story sort of gets at the type of conflict that Jesus is talking about here, because you'll recall that St. Francis, he came from a very wealthy family. His father had a very successful business, textiles and things of that nature. And of course, he wanted his son to continue the family business. Because, of course, if the family business was in those good hands, then he might be able to retire or something of that, something like that. But it was really this concern that he wanted his son to contribute to the family wealth. And St. Francis, of course, didn't want that. He wanted to pursue higher things. He wanted to follow Jesus much, much more closely and dedicate his life to cultivating those virtues. And so we see a conflict. It wasn't Francis rejecting his family that didn't come along with him. It was his family sort of rejecting him and disowning him because he pursued those things. There's many other stories, of course, of saints in similar situations. In fact, there's many women saints, women religious specifically, who, especially from these noble and wealthy families, whose marriages were practically arranged because it was very strategic. They wanted their daughter to marry into a particular family to increase the family's prestige, increase their sphere of influence, and of course increase their wealth. And so many of these women, again, they wanted nothing to do with that. They wanted to follow the Lord, and so against their family's will, they chose to enter into religious life and dedicate themselves to the service of the poor, prayer, and the cultivation, again, of these virtues. So, again, religious practice is obviously a part of these conflicts, but the emphasis, when we look at this story in the context, is more about what it is that we're pursuing in life at all. Is it virtue, and is it valuing some of these worldly things less and placing the emphasis on these virtues more? And there is, of course, a lot of light here that can be shed on the way that we live this out at home and in our parish. And again, there's a lot of conflict over religious practices, especially so many of you know the sadness of having a child, perhaps an adult child, leave the faith. And there's a lot of conflict over those religious practices. This gospel always causes some of those to come to the surface. But sometimes the way that we talk about these practices and these religious teachings of our faith really can seem very arbitrary. And so we might have conflict over mass attendance or religious devotions, other things. And again, some of that conflict might be necessary, but a lot of the conflict, especially when we're the ones perhaps being the ones initiating that conflict, there's something that's not quite getting at what Jesus is. And so, again, I suggest looking at this through what we might call a growth mentality, or looking at this through a paradigm of growth in virtue. Because this certainly values religious doctrine and religious teaching and religious practices, but it's not really the emphasis. The emphasis is on virtue. It emphasizes the fruits of the Spirit, growth in things like patience, peace, and generosity, kindness, and other things. It isn't easy, of course, to measure spiritual growth, but it's important that we try, especially if you're raising young children. Many, of course, like me, we had this wall in our home growing up where every few months my brother and I would stand in front of it, and my dad would mark our height so we could see how much we were growing. And I remember as a kid sort of being fascinated by that, when you're a kid and you feel trapped in your youth, and then this is evidence that, no, I am actually growing. okay? Again, it was helpful for me to see that. And obviously, it's not as easy to do that with things like virtue, but it's important that we have that in the mind of ourselves and perhaps children, so that we can see and sort of make them aware that we do see the growth, that it's something that we see in them. Again, it's easy to focus on the devotions themselves. Okay, we're praying the rosary as a family, we're going to Mass as a family. Oh, good, they didn't put up as big of a fight this time as they usually do, and we do those things. But again, to focus on the growth that you see. I see you becoming more responsible with your younger siblings. I see you being kind to other people. That is so important, because as those affirmations start coming in, again, it can feed a hunger for more of those things. Children do need to be affirmed for growing in the virtues, and it's not as easy to track. It's up for parents to affirm their children when they see growth occur, and that requires a lot of attention. Again, if we're distracted by our worldly prestige and things of that nature, by our wealth, we're going to be a little bit more blind to those things. So again, it's not just trying to shape this for the children, but we need it as well. And I need to do this as a pastor of a parish also. Of course, being here only, a little over a year and splitting time between multiple communities, not being able to be here every single week, it is hard to measure the growth. But even though it's hard to see the growth, because sometimes this growth is very slow, I will say that so far myself and the other priests who are serving you, we have certainly seen a lot of those virtues here in the parish. And it's clear that there has been growth happening for a very long time. As far as the fruits of the Spirit go, I've been the beneficiary of a great deal of kindness and a great deal of generosity, of course. Again, priests don't starve, I'll tell you that much. I have more people offering food than I can possibly eat. So there's a lot of generosity. And I will say that whenever I'm able to be here, whether it's during the week or on the weekend, I experience a great deal of peace when I'm out here at St. Columban. So yes, those virtues are setting in. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the growth continue and to have a part in fostering that growth. I'm honored to have that. But yes, sometimes division and conflict is a real thing. In fact, even talking about virtue, it's already happened. People don't want to hear as much of this. They want to hear culture war issues. They want to hear truth of difficult things that we see on the news. And I get it. But again, that's where some of the conflict comes about that. When we begin, again, to place the focus. Not everyone's going to go along with it. But even though division happens in families, and it's true that not all of our family members desire that, that it's still important that we pursue. Even though Jesus warns us that division will happen, division is not always inevitable. Because I've seen instances where someone in a family decides that they want to pursue those things. And even though it might be a little embarrassing to tell their family members that they want to begin to grow in faith and get to know God and understand what He's revealed about Himself and about being human, even though there might be some hesitancy there, some fear that it might cause some of this division. It so happens that other people are actually willing to come along, and other people will actually join in that journey to the Lord and embark on this life of growing in faith and growing in virtue and integrating the faith over a lifetime into the way we think and the way we see and the way that we live. So I have seen it happen. Doesn't always happen, but it does happen that others will want to join. So again, focusing on the virtue, again, it will actually, and this was a point that didn't make it in here that I want to make now, it's kind of the footnote of the homily, I guess, or the end note, is actually placing some of the emphasis on those virtues. It will actually start to help us, especially the young, connect the dots between those practices and the virtues that they form and the way of life that they lead us to. So emphasizing that and seeing how those devotions support this life of faith and the cultivation of these good things is certainly a way to pass on the faith and hopefully journey together in deeper communion with the Lord.